It was a gray, foggy day. It was always a gray, foggy day on the island. The clouds forever roamed the melancholy skies overhead, and sometimes it seemed as if the mist had simply rolled in one day and never bothered to leave. The evergreens breathed gently over the salty sea, and the beach appeared to die a little with every gasp. Old Man Selvig stepped out of his rickety shack, the same rickety shack he had lived in all his life. He inhaled the saline air, letting the ghosts of whales and sea urchins fill his lungs before releasing them to be caught again at a later time. He looked over at the small shanty he had built over the water exactly 100 moons ago. The days of constant exposure to the caress of the ocean had weathered the wood, transforming it from a healthy brown into a dismal gray. It was now the same shade of gray as Selvig's hair. Selvig walked over to the shanty, his every step creaking in his bones along the wharf, sending vibrations down the wooden posts and ripples throughout the water. He didn't look down into the water. Selvig never looked down. Not since last autumn. Not since he first built the shanty. The door to the shanty bore a small peephole and a mail slot, unusual amenities for a fishing shack. Nobody in such a secluded area would have needed to peek at potential visitors, nor would any courier deliver parcels to the dilapidated lean-to. Yet still, these features were present on the door, and Selvig would have argued them necessary. Just as he had done on every other day, the elderly fisherman peered into the peephole and knocked on the door. The inside of the shanty was dark, and not much was visible, save for the vague shapes and silhouettes of filleting knives, fish hooks, jiggers, hatchets, and other sharp, gleaming instruments used for mutilating the flesh of sea creatures. From the corner of his yellowed, bloodshot eyes, he saw slow shadows creeping along the floor of the shanty, and he knew he had awoken his friend. He reached to his right and grabbed onto the faded green rope that descended into the shallow waters below. As he hoisted the rope into his hands, the slimy residue of rotten seaweed, decaying meat, and algae made its presence known to his skin. It didn't bother Selvig. He was used to it by now. At the end of the rope was a bucket full of bloody meat, fastened shut with a lid on the top to keep seagulls and other critters from getting at it. Selvig kept it in the water because it gave the meat a salty flavoring that he knew his friend liked more. Lifting the lid and reaching into the bucket, he grabbed a hefty slab of meat and forced it into the mail slot. He heard the wet slap of the chunk hitting the floor. Selvig peered into the peephole again and watched as a mass of black tentacles slithered across the floor and grabbed the meat that had been left for it. A single glowing emerald eye rolled over and looked directly through the peephole, staring into Selvig's soul. Selvig had done his duty, as he did every day, and bid his friend adieu. He returned the bucket of meat to the water and walked back to his shack. Inside the minuscule abode, the stench of rotten meat filled the air. His hands reeked of salt and decay. It didn't perturb him much. He was used to it. He walked over to his kitchen table and picked up the last edition of the newspaper that he'd procured during his most recent visit to the mainland. He had not yet read the issue. In a case that has left the local law enforcement confused and stunned, 3 fishermen from the Barons Cove area of town have vanished without a trace within the past 2 months. Henry Feltham, 57, Thomas Amherst, 58, and Reginald Derry, 63, have not been seen by any witnesses in the Tri-River region since their apparent disappearances. Any citizens with information on the whereabouts of these men are asked to report to the Widow's Witch Police Department immediately. An uneasy feeling overtook Selvig as he placed the paper down on the table. Looking out his kitchen window at 3 crosses standing in his backyard, he felt weary. He walked into his bedroom and lay down next to his wife. Selvig cried himself to sleep that night, but his wife could not comfort him, for she hadn't any arms. Nor did she have any legs. In fact, there wasn't much left to Selvig's wife. But then again, there wasn't much left of Old Man Selvig either.